Okay, welcome to the second Q&A video, and last time I asked you to try and guess what I'm going to paint, and a few of you did get the answer correct, which was Surf Ski 2. But this time, man, no one's ever gonna guess what I'm going to draw this time. So, let's go. Okay, so the first question comes from Rinkas, who asks, when should you consider learning pitch accent, or do you think it's not worth learning? And I'd say that it depends. But I think it's very much worth being at least familiar with the basics of pitch accent from early on, because then you'll be at least subconsciously aware of it throughout your entire Japanese learning journey. I also think that doing the bare minimum of having pitch accent graphs for your Anki card target words is going to help as well. Not that you should hit again when you got the pitch wrong, but just so you could look at the graphs as you listen to the audio or when doing your reviews with the sound muted. And actually, because of this very question, I finally decided to add them to my own cards as well, which is something I've been meaning to do for so long now, but I just never took the time for it. I actually kinda regret not doing that from day one, because there's a chance that I missed out on 6 years of subtle pitch accent gains because of that. But at the same time, maybe the difference would have been marginal, because just from having listened to the audio of some of the cards so many times, especially in the Core 2K6K deck, I remember what most of those words sounded like, which also means that I get their pitch correct most of the time as well. And overall, just from doing immersion and reviewing my Anki cards with audio, my pitch accent ended up becoming surprisingly okay. I obviously still do make pitch accent mistakes, but what I personally care about the most when it comes to improving my output right now is just speaking smoothly without making any grammar mistakes. And whether or not I'm going to do a direct pitch accent study in the future is something that I don't really know, but my hope is to pick up most of it just from being aware of it whilst doing immersion. Okay, the next question comes from Oxley Grieve, who asks, have you ever read much philosophy, or are you interested in doing so? My favorite ideas are from Albert Camus. I have read a little bit of actual philosophy books that I'll put up on the screen, but when it comes to whether or not I'm interested in doing so, yes and no. In some ways, I'm really interested in philosophy, but in other ways, I'm not. I feel like there is a difference between quote-unquote personal philosophy and academic philosophy. The latter is an actual academic field that requires a lot of study of a wide range of philosophical ideas and works, which is something that I feel like I'm not personally too interested in because it serves a completely different purpose from what draws me to philosophy. Essentially, philosophy for me is something that can be used to make sense of and extract purpose from what is, which therefore can lead to a strong sense of direction. And for the practice of philosophy to fulfill that goal, I feel like it doesn't require as wide of a scope as academic philosophy, which isn't necessarily concerned with that personalized goal to begin with. This means that I lack interest in certain philosophical works and ideas because I suspect that me reading them won't align with the aforementioned goal, especially if those works are concerned with concepts that I find to have a high likelihood for being flawed. Related to this, I'm also pretty interested in psychology and human behavior. Maybe even more so than philosophy, even though I'd say that they both feed into each other quite a lot. There was even a time where I was really into learning about such topics, including neuroscience and so on, so I listened to a lot of lectures on YouTube and such, and I even dabbled with the thought of maybe going to college to get a degree in one of those fields, just out of curiosity. However, eventually I began learning Japanese and started working on various endeavors, which slowly started eating away the time I had for such other interests. But actually, I'm slowly trying to get back into it by reading such works in Japanese. In fact, I currently am reading a book in Japanese, which is kind of relevant to all of this, but I'll talk about that in some future video. So hopefully that answers your question. Next is question 3 from Samuel Surgeon. I was curious whether or not you use any habit tracking apps or software to keep track of Japanese or other tasks/hobbies that you do. So back in 2021, when I started the Japanese Immersion Summer Challenge, I used Toggle Track to count how many hours of Japanese immersion I've done, and I found it pretty useful for keeping myself consistent. Tracking hours is kind of like tracking calories in that sense, and I tracked my Japanese for around 2 years, but eventually I stopped because I just found it unnecessary, as the 20 new words a day sentence mining goal kept me consistent anyway, and to be honest, the main reason I was tracking past the summer challenge was just to gather data for future videos. And when it comes to other work, I don't really use anything other than Trello and a private Discord server for taking notes. Question 4 comes from Yoshi1. What were some of the resources you used when you were learning Russian? Websites, Anki decks, YouTube channels, etc. So aside from learning Russian in school for 6 years, which I made a video about, I started self-learning Russian using Duolingo back in 2017, and eventually I started using Anki with some completely random Russian sentence deck that I found on Anki web, but I probably wouldn't use that one anymore as it was really focused on output. The only Russian learning YouTube channel I used was Be Fluent in Russian, and in total I self-learned Russian only for around 130 days, which is like absolutely nothing compared to how much time I put into learning Japanese, for example. And by now, my Russian is basically non-existent. Question 5 comes from Rin. Do you recommend starting sentence mining after having learned around 500 words in Anki, but having some Japanese knowledge from courses and things I learned by myself? I feel like I'm not making progress and my Japanese feels stuck. And thanks for all of your videos. I found your channel from the Abandoned Store renovation series, from which I looked at your channel and found the videos about learning Japanese, which made me wait for more videos from the channel. I should have written this in the morning and not at 4 AM, but hey, don't forget to support Liva with Migaku Reflink. Link in the description. Well, anyway, first of all, it's really cool that you found my channel from the renovation series because almost all the views on those videos come from my existing subscribers, meaning that unfortunately it's almost like a private series, but I do want to make more renovation videos in the future as well. And when it comes to sentence mining at 500 words, I'd say that it's going to be extremely difficult and probably really frustrating. But it's doable if you focus on mining content that's designed to be easy and comprehensible, and of course, if you can actually stay consistent with that, even if it gets boring. But over time, as your Japanese improves, you're going to unlock a wider variety of content, which in of itself can be really fun. I'd also recommend checking out my motivation tips video, as it's a bit related to this question. Question 6 comes from Captain Vet. What are your thoughts on intraday learning using Anki? In example, doing a main session, then only having new cards where you're going to press good for 10 minutes, 2 hours, and then doing those new cards 2 hours later in smaller sessions until you graduate them all to at least 1 day interval. I've heard it boosts retention for those cards the next day and helps get through the rough phases of learning new cards a lot quicker. I'd say that you can try, but at the same time it feels awfully complicated in the sense that, at least personally, when I take new cards at the end of my regular reviews, it feels like I'm already at the finish line. It doesn't take me long to finish them, especially because very often I just mined those cards from immersion on the very same day, so they're still fresh in my memory, which is pretty similar when you think about it, but I'd say that it has a much stronger effect. And realistically speaking, if you're going to be doing Anki every day for years to come, it's going to be difficult to use methods that require specific timings. Like ever since getting started, I've been doing my reviews pretty much around the clock. So you can experiment, but I feel like it's not going to make that big of a difference anyway. And question 7, which comes from Brian, is also related to this. So, do you feel that learning 30 new Japanese words a day is now easier than it was for the first 20k words? In other words, does picking up new Japanese words become easier as you learn more? And my answer is yes, absolutely. When I was getting started, learning even 10 new words a day got very difficult over time in the beginning for me. But now that I'm much more familiar with kanji as well as their potential meanings, it makes it much easier to guess what a new word means and how it's read. And probably the fact that I found most of those words from context through my own immersion makes it easier as well. Question 8 comes from What's the Story? Any drawing videos planned? Also, what do you think of Beksinski? The drawing video question is something that I already answered in my last Q&A, and my answer to it is still pretty much the same. AKA that I would like to, but have no plans for it right now, aside from doing things like what I'm doing with this video, for example. And when it comes to Beksinski, I'm pretty sure that I've seen their art before as well, and while it's not something that I necessarily connect with the most, it's still pretty unique and interesting, although ironically, I feel like nowadays, unfortunately, the first impression many people are going to have is that it kinda looks AI generated now because of all the small details and accessories, but oh well. And question 9 comes from Mike's. What would you say you're most interested in drawing? Like scenes, environments, backgrounds, characters, etc. Perhaps different mediums as well. Any favorite artists? I'd say that what I'm most interested in drawing is what allows me to convey certain emotion or atmospheres. For example, recreating certain dreams I had. or what the atmosphere felt like during certain periods of my life. And those reasons are actually also why I got into drawing with the eye to making animations in the future, so I could combine audio with visuals, and for that, drawing characters is going to be by far the biggest challenge. Everything else I feel like I could manage in one way or another. But making actual animations seems so time consuming and difficult that I'd be happy if I could even make a manga at this point. But I feel like both of those endeavors are just pipe dreams, at least for now. And when it comes to favorite artists, there are many that I like. To name a few, out of the mangaka, for example Nagabe, and when it comes to more traditional art, I'd say Yuri Arak and Hiroshi Nagai. Question 10 comes from Dosi, who asks, I am currently learning Japanese mainly through the Core 2K 6K deck, and I'm still early into learning Japanese, like 400 cards from the Core 2K 6K deck. Now, I want to learn more, but I feel stuck with what I should do. Should I just do more cards, or should I start immersing by understanding like 5 to 10 words or phrases per video? How did you start to learn more and slowly start to understand Japanese? I'd say that you don't need to rush with learning, especially with Anki, because Anki will automatically start taking longer over time, and the most important part about Anki is to manage it in a way that it wouldn't start taking so long that you can't keep up with it anymore. So if you want to do more, then immersing is most likely going to be the best thing you can do. As for myself, I did the Core 2K 6K deck at a pretty slow pace. I mean, it took me nearly 3 years. After that, I didn't make any new Anki cards for like 2 weeks. After that, I started making 20 new cards a day from sentence mining, which was really hard at first, but I was surprisingly able to keep up with it. Question 11 comes from Taylor. Hey, I've been following the channel for a few years now and have dabbled with learning Japanese but never stuck to it. So I'm near enough 0% progress in the language. I'm going to be spending a month in Japan from May 8th. What would you recommend doing to learn the most Japanese before I go, so I can have basic interactions, etc.? I'm currently taking 10 new cards a day from the Core 2K 6K deck. Thanks. Unfortunately, by now, May is already pretty close, but honestly, if you're already taking 10 new cards a day, then you're already doing quite a lot, especially for a beginner. Of course, I could say that you can also immerse for 16 hours a day and try to output as much as possible with natives or italki teachers, so you'd be prepared a month from now to output in real life as well, but I'm not sure how realistic all of that is, and unfortunately, no matter what you do, you're not going to be super fluent by May anyway, so just keep on doing what you're doing and try to enjoy Japan once you get there. Question 12 comes from Ferry, who asks, how do you plan/organize your video making process and manage working on multiple projects at the same time? Essentially, how do you decide what to work on and how much work needs to be done on a given day? So I basically don't do any precise planning, and I don't have a quote-unquote work schedule. I generally just have a hunch for what I'm going to do for the day and try to finish as much as I can before I need to make time for something like sentence mining, Anki, gym, eating, cleaning, and so on. I feel like that makes much more sense for me as well, considering that I never know exactly how long certain tasks are going to take. Although I do some general planning, like once I finish X video, I'm going to do some different kind of work for a few days instead, and after that I'm going to take care of certain other responsibilities, and when that's done, I'll start working on the next video, which is going to be about this topic, and so on. So time for the final question, 13, which is by Dozy, who asks, hey, thanks for all the videos, they have really been a big motivator for me to keep on improving myself. This is quite a personal question, so don't worry if you don't fancy talking about it. Have you dealt with much heartbreak/depression? If so, how did you/how do you deal with it? Especially with regards to motivation and staying consistent with your passions. The reason I ask is I've been going through a pretty shitty breakup, which has really taken a toll on my motivation, and I found myself slipping into bad habits like losing hours to YouTube/Instagram when I'm not feeling good, etc. If I had to give advice when it comes to heartbreak, while I could give some cookie cutter advice that you can probably find elsewhere as well, maybe a completely different angle might help someone instead, which is to realize that in reality, you don't have a problem. You feel pain when certain thoughts connect themselves with specific memories, and there's a chance that a part of you is emotionally attached to said thoughts. If you had a switch that could just turn them off, it's likely that you'd hesitate in using it because subconsciously you don't want to let go. Subconsciously you don't want to move forward, and you use those thoughts as a tool to prevent yourself from moving forward. And a part of this might be because you still believe that you can go back to what once was, in which case, not wanting to let go of those thoughts and the pain associated with them actually makes a lot of sense. But you cannot stay in this state forever. You need to realize that if you want to move forward, you don't need those thoughts anymore. You can stop using them as a tool which serves a goal that you don't have a need for anymore. There's a really high chance that even if you don't really do anything particular, you'll naturally get over it with time. But when it comes to motivation and so on, purposely using different kinds of thoughts which lead to activities that keep you busy can help speed up the process and bring you back up to speed with other things in life. Now, of course, not everything always comes so easy, but I still hope that my words made sense and served a benefit at least to someone. Anyway, those are all the questions I received for both the February Q&A as well as the March one. I decided to combine both of them into this video because March is almost over by now anyway. And I decided that I'm not going to make the April Q&A into a video, but instead I'll just reply directly to the questions in text form instead. So if there's anything you want to ask me, you can do so on Patreon and I'll try my best to respond. Anyway, the painting is complete. I mean, it's kind of like they say, the drowned dragon is missing the vital touches, but I mean, it was fun. But I do wonder how many people can tell what this is from this painting that looks like I made it look bad on purpose. So if you know what this is, let me know in the comments and I'll see you in some next video.